I'm Shannon Holzer, professor at HCU for the course Intelligence and National Security. And today we're going to be talking about the Cold War and the importance of the Cold War to the current situation in the geopolitical realm. You know, how did it affect the way we do warfare, how to affect the way we do intelligence and national security. And of course, this could take hours to dissect, so I'm going to try to keep it brief within 5 minutes. And so obviously you got to skim the high points. And the major thing that we can learn from the Cold War is that warfare can be conducted without military or the use of military arms. Or the implementation. The Cold War, we stockpiled weapons, we created new weapons, we displayed new weapons, we tested new weapons, we fought over new weapons, and then we never used them. And we had the doctrine of MAD, which was mutually assured destruction, where we had created such an arsenal of nuclear warheads that we could basically bomb our opposition out of existence, and they could do the same to us. And so what we did, rather than aim the nuclear warheads at military sites, what we did is we aimed them at the population centers. The assumption of this was that if you aim at a military site or a nuclear silo and they shoot first and then you respond, you aim at that nuclear silo and you're basically hitting an empty target, so it would have been a worthless shot. So you figured what you did was, if they're going to aim their nuclear weapon at us, we don't aim it at their nuclear silo that's now empty. We aim it at their major population center, say Moscow. And they know that if they shoot us, we're going to be wiping out millions of people. And in the same vein, they didn't aim at our nuclear silos. What they aimed at was Los Angeles, New York City, Houston, Texas, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so we had the doctrine of MAD, mutually assured destruction. And so that was a big deal. But that was just in the sense where during the Cold War, we didn't fire, but we had the ability to do so. It could have turned into a hot war at any moment. What else was going on during the Cold War, though, was a massive encounter of intelligence and propaganda and misinformation and disinformation. And one of the famous people that came out of the Cold War to issue a warning to us, or maybe just a description of what has gone on in America during the Cold War, was a guy named Yuri Bezmenov, in which he talked about how America was subverted by the communists during the Cold War. And he broke it down into stages about how the American form of government was subverted by communism during this time. Well, what were the two ideologies that were at war with one another? One was communism, the other was American liberalism. For communists, they have an economic system of, they have a command economy where the government is in control of all the goods, services, and the means of production. There's no private ownership of business. And thus everybody, in a sense, is an employee of the government. There's no religious liberty. There's enforced atheism in the communist during this time, the Soviet Union, in that there were churches that if you operated, you're doing so outside of government authority. And then third, this is in direct contrast to the American liberal government, is that there are no individual rights and liberties, such as the freedom of speech, because the freedom of speech can be subversive to the narrative of that which the party, the Communist Party in this case, was giving the population. Under communism, the whole is more important than the part, and thus your individual rights really mean nothing in comparison to the rights of the whole or the existence of the whole. The Gulag system was implemented to put dissidents in their place, to re-educate them, to punish them. And at the height of the Gulag system in the Soviet Union, it is said that about 25% of the people spent time in a prison camp where they did forced labor, and they had no trial, virtually no trial. Their accusers were often their neighbors who maybe they had a personal beef with them, and they just kind of reported them. Sometimes they even had children report on their parents, and they would go before a board, and that they basically know the court case would last 15 minutes. There's the Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn, which is probably the gold standard on the Gulag system. But Anne Applebaum wrote a Pulitzer Prize winning book called Gulag, and I've really enjoyed that. But nonetheless, that's the communist worldview. In contrast to that is the capitalist or the American liberal worldview, in which we view individual rights and liberties as the primary function of our government is to protect those individual rights, such as the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And thus we create a constitution that guarantees that the government will protect these natural rights, such as the right to free speech, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms and the like, and that these rights are not given to us by government, they're actually given to us by God, thus it's grounded in God, and that's the government's job to protect rights, not provide them. So the government's not there to take over for the whole and to dole out permission. It is there to protect the rights that we naturally have, okay? So the government cannot give rights, but they can violate them according to this. Other principles of liberal democracy are consent to the governed, popular sovereignty, republicanism, that is that the governments are ruled, our country is a collection of shared governments from federal to state to county to city and onward down. And then we have a rule of law, that the laws not only apply to the governed, but to those who govern us. And that is in contrast to communist nations as well. One thing we did to contrast ourselves during the Cold War was to have our Pledge of Allegiance modified to add the words "under God" there. And the reason we said we pledge allegiance to the flag, under God, like one nation under God, right, is to create a contrast between our nation being under God and communism being apart from God. And anyway, so communism, according to Yuri Bezmenov, during the Cold War was being pumped into America through different means, through the youth, K through 12. And if you look at much of the stuff these kids are taught, they're often taught, that, it takes a village to raise a kid, rather than parents, right? That is the collective that does this. They're taught certain principles that were contained in, the communist idea that there's the oppressed and the oppressor, and that there's been a war between the haves and the have-nots. And so they grow up K through 12 being taught this often through the textbooks, and there's been a big war over this. Now, Yuri Bezmenov suggests that, goes on not only through K through 12, but through the colleges and the universities. They teach Marxism, which, by the way, is what we were just talking about. And that this Marxism is easily accepted by the students because, after all, they're being taught by those who profess, to be knowers of the truth, and then they test them on that. And they've been told this as though it is the truth, not just K through 12, but now reinforced through college. And his suggestion is it's easy to do this because he says they have soft heads. What he really suggests is that their minds are malleable and very easily influenced. Of course it is. They haven't become dogmatic, set in their ways. They're not cynical and skeptical yet. And thus, you teach them this, they take it as fact, especially when you do so as an authority figure. Another way that this is done is through the entertainment industry. You have people like Katy Perry or something come up. She's a very famous person. She starts spewing her views. And of course, the youth seem to want to be cool. They think she's cool, want to be like the cool person. Thus, we do the same thing that cool people do. You obviously, if you want to be cool, you do what cool people do. You get the same result. Well, one of the things that cool people do sometimes is vote a certain way, and you don't want to be left out one of those guys. And oh my God, you voted for him. I voted for this person, and thus you get slogans like "I'm with her," things like that, which are more of a slogan to suggest not that I agree with the program, but I'm part of the group. And so actors are very famous, influential people. Anybody who has any sense of charisma is made use of. Finally, the news is actually a very important part of the puzzle. In Soviet Russia, the news was part of the arm of the KGB. The KGB was, like the CIA of America, and they were the intelligence agency. They were the disseminators of that which the population should believe. What is the party saying you ought to believe now? And so the news often gets caught up in this. It's not uncommon for somebody in the news to be married to people who are in politics and policymakers, and thus they take on those policies too, and then they will tell their stories from their point of view, from that worldview. And in the case of the communistic propaganda, what you find is that Marxist propaganda has entered into the media. Now, this is all, when I say this, I'm not saying this as my point of view. This is what Yuri Bezmenov spoke about. And there's an hour and a half long interview that I will provide on the syllabus link to for you guys to watch. And you watch this guy with the confidence of which he speaks about how this happened. And then you reflect on what's going on in our own country, and you're like, oh my God, man, how far have we come down this hole that they sent us on through misinformation, disinformation, to the point where we can't trust our own politicians anymore. We don't trust our own federal agencies anymore. We don't trust the bureaucracies anymore. We don't trust the news sources anymore, and our country has become divided. That did not happen by accident. That is the result of a campaign of information warfare and ideological warfare that the communists started long before the Cold War began. And so it entered into our into the war zone through the schools, through the media, and through the entertainment industry. And there was a reason why McCarthyism targeted the schools, targeted the professors, targeted the actors, targeted the writers, and during the Red Scare. And of course, who tells the story of the Red Scare? Well, the people who write the textbooks for the history classes, and what about the actors and the writers in the films and the plays and the television shows? They're telling the story of McCarthyism. And so, of course, who's the bad guy in that? The guy who was combating, communism and accused them of it. So, anyway, with that being said, the result of the Cold War may not be over yet. That this information warfare between Marxism, communism, that is, and American liberal democracy has continued to play out in the theater of war in which they put it. That is the realm of ideas, in classrooms, in the entertainment industry, and in the dissemination of news. So keep that in mind as you take on information. Ask yourself the question, from where is this news coming? From where is this actor's point of view? What about the stuff I was taught as a kid, and what is being taught to my kid? Think about the misinformation, disinformation that may possibly be there. I'm not saying to distrust, but as the Gipper used to say, that being Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. So with that being said, keep that in mind that the Cold War had its effects. Have a good day.